2017, The Final Preparation of the Kings and Priests, Chapter 26, A New DNA is in the Earth. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover, because this is going to give us a greater insight into what is happening right now in the earth and what we should be expecting. We're going to talk about global consciousness, bloodlines of the fallen angels, the blood of Christ, flesh and blood not inheriting the kingdom, a new creation, the genetic DNA and chromosome makeup of the human species, the Nephilim, a new genetic code, the issue of Abraham and Ishmael, and the issue of the Israelites and their disobedience when they went in to possess the land. There's quite a bit of material here we want to cover. As well, we're going to review a vision which came October of 2015 concerning the blood moon. We're dealing with issues of awareness as we move more deeply into this timeline. This issue of awareness has been at the forefront of what the sons have had to deal with because they're coming out of a state of unawareness and into a state of clarity. The sons are coming alive. The more you ascend into the Father's house, the more you're caught up, and the greater your awareness is of what is truly happening and unfolding in the realm of spirit. The Lord asks, will you be aware? Isaiah 43:19, behold, I will do something new. Will you be aware? That all depends upon whether you're a wise or foolish virgin, for only the wise will have eyes to see during this time. Lord, we ask your blessing as you pull back the shrouds of deceit and illusion. Give us insight as to what exactly is happening and how you positioned us. Several weeks ago, we began to look into issues concerning the bloodlines and ancestry of civilizations. It has always been very interesting to me to go into the Gospels, as well as some of the early books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. The Lord was so precise in laying down the genealogy of those that walk the earth. And I always wondered why. Why does this really matter? In the Gospels, it traces back the lineage of Christ, and I always wondered what that was really all about. You can say, well, Christ came from the lineage of David, and David was a man of God. The anointing can be traced back generation to generation. And you can go back to Jacob and the passing down of the blessing. And you can say, well, what was that all about? But I began to understand that what we're dealing with here is more than what meets the eye. In the circles of darkness of the Nephilim, the sons of Satan, and even those that are very active in the governance and administration of the current state of affairs right now in the earth, the pecking order is largely influenced by their ability to trace their lineage back to the original fallen angels. Odd but interesting. It has only been in the last generation or two that the public has become aware of some of this. The satanic web that has been sewn so intricately throughout all of mankind has gone on for thousands of years. The presence of Satan is so broad and expansive that it can really stagger the mind to grasp just how much infiltration the satanic spirit realm has had into mankind. Now, our focus has been, and will continue to be, breaking through into sonship, breaking through into the deep transformation that God has set as part of our destiny. And you don't do this by backing into it with a burgeoning awareness of all the evil. That is not going to create faith. That is not going to do anything. If anything, it would create more of a fear in the unregenerated soul mind of man, which of course is what they intend. A few years back, I was led into a meeting in the Spirit where I observed the satanic hosts. I saw what was happening as Satan began to give out his orders for the day, and I saw at that point that God was beginning to bring a deep confusion in the camp of the enemy, an inability for them to communicate. It was already beginning at that time, and I know that we're further into this as God begins to bring a confusion in the camp of the enemy and an inability for them to move in any type of oneness or agreement. You remember what happened in the Old Testament in the time of the Tower of Babel. That basically was the gathering of the Nephilim seed in the earth at the time. Those weren't just ordinary people. That was the seed of the Nephilim that had spawned throughout man. And as they met together, they knew that if they were of one mind and one accord, that they could do anything. The building of the Tower of Babel was a foreshadowing of what could be achieved through a level of agreement and oneness, which was being tapped into by the children of wrath at that time. The flip side, of course, is the oneness that the sons of God are moving into. Nevertheless, what did God do as this began to unfold? He didn't allow it. He brought confusion and literally an inability to communicate, and the Nephilim seed was dispersed throughout the earth. This is something that we need to understand a little bit more, so we're going to talk about bloodlines. When those of the upper echelon of the satanic circles meet, the position that they have is based upon their direct lineage to the fallen angels, to the first that came and dwelt with women and begat the Nephilim, and the Rephaim, and the various satanic seeds that began to unfold in the earth. That really began the whole story. Now, in this timeline, the position of the satanic seed and their input into this generation is tied to the hierarchy of their direct ancestry. There's a lot to be said about bloodlines. What we're talking about here is a very vast subject, and there's a lot we're trying to cover here. One of the words which came in the first book, the manifestation of the sons of God, was breaking the bonds with your past, breaking the bonds with your genealogy. The Lord began to speak that we were in this process of breaking bonds, bonds with ourselves, bonds with how we relate to people, bonds on every level. However, the greatest bond that we need to break is the bond with humanity. For God is creating something new within the sons. The sons are not even to be bonded to the Adamic nature, and this is a big one. Like many words that come from the Lord, this can be difficult to walk in, and oftentimes you really don't know. Oftentimes you have to take it like Mary and ponder it in your heart and say, okay, Lord, I accept this. I am determined to break this last bond. Therefore I speak it and I prophesy it, and I give myself to whatever the process might be. In the Word it says, be ye not a part of this age, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. We're definitely being pulled out of the last attachment to this age. This is happening in direct correlation to the renewing of the mind that the sons are experiencing. The only way you can step outside of this age and no longer be a part of it is through the deep renewing of the mind. It is not a product of your decision or determination or dedication. As you enter into the mind of Christ, the ties you had to this age are severed progressively deeper and deeper. It can be a challenge because relationships you've had will potentially cease to exist on levels that they were. People will not understand that God is pulling you out of this age. And when the renewing of the mind happens, it is something so complete that you cannot go back and say, well, I've decided to walk the fine line between the two. No, when God delivers you out of this age, He delivers you. It's a lot more than just saying, well, I'm not a part of this age. I am born again. We know that this is only the beginning of that process. God is extracting the sons out of a paradigm that has been limited and dictated by virtue of their involvement in this age. The sons have not really understood how much they've been affected by the governing spirit world that they lived under, which has been a canopy over the face of the earth. We've spoken about this before a number of times, that all of the world lies under the power of the evil one, and the vast darkness that pervades the earth during this time. God is pulling the sons out of a paradigm, out of an identity to the human race, to mankind, to this age, and the sons are literally beginning to manifest the commandment where it said, "Be not a part of her." The deliverance out of this age is a deliverance from the whore, as it speaks of in the book of Revelation, that has fed off the blood of the martyrs. Everyone may think that walking with God is a decision, but walking with God is a transformation. It is a life of transformation. In the Word it talks about how the blood of Christ cleanses us from all sin. And yet the Word says flesh and blood will not inherit the kingdom, but a new creation. Let's stop for a minute and go back to the days of Genesis. Imagine as we review this, visualize with me what is happening. So the fallen angels become very interested and decide they're going to come and lay with men and beget giants. What was that really all about? Was that really just an act of lust and rebellion, or was there something else happening? What we're talking about is literally the corruption of mankind that happened at the time of Genesis 6. What was Satan looking to achieve? He was actually looking to literally corrupt the DNA of mankind. He already knew the prophecies of what was going to come, that the seed of the woman was going to bruise the serpent, and that Christ was going to come out of a pure lineage. A pure lineage. So what happens back in the time of Genesis? Well, we have a DNA adjustment that happened with mankind. Mankind was corrupted from what God had originally created them to be. People during this time think that they can change their DNA, that all they have to do is deep breathe and visualize or go online and do a few steps to change their DNA. But you can't change your DNA. You can control aspects of your DNA or genes that may determine how you are to be or how you are to act or what your illnesses might be. For this carries down from your ancestry. So you can do that. You can control. But you can't change your DNA. So it's very interesting. How do you change DNA? There has to be something that is grafted in that brings about a change. What happened when the fallen angels came into mankind? They brought about a DNA change. And you saw it manifest as they begat giants in the land that were born of the seed of man and the seed of the fallen angels. Presto! You have a new DNA in the earth, and it's not pure by any means. The purity of mankind now becomes an issue and a concern regarding the prophecies of what was to come. Maybe you've not thought about it like this, but it continues to get worse and worse. I can't say to what degree, but I would say by far and large the majority of mankind within generations of the initial act had a DNA that was compromised, that was not pure. It became so compromised that God had to bring an act of literally wiping out the human race. And so he brought the flood. It was a lot more than Satan coming in and manipulating people and people being turned over to their own lusts. A lot more than that had happened. Mankind had evolved into a different DNA. You no longer had the purity of what God the Father first introduced in Adam and Eve. So what was the answer? Well, the answer was to wipe them all out. If you go back and read the accounts of Noah, Noah and his 3 sons and their wives were brought on the ark. Noah and his sons were of a pure DNA. And it makes you wonder, after the flood, what happened? Over a course of time, once again, the Nephilim were in the earth. You have the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, all of these clans that had the Nephilim DNA, the seed of the Nephilim. The seed of the fallen angels once again arose out of the flood. How did that happen? Well, there are no accounts of the fallen angels coming back and repeating what they did, but one of the wives did not have a pure DNA. I believe references have been made to Ham's wife, that something in her was not pure. Even if it was so minute, it was not pure. It was something of a hybrid. Anyway, somehow the Nephilim made it through the flood. Somehow a small genetic aberration came through the flood. And we saw what happened through the act of Ham in the days that followed. So as time unfolds, you see the rise of the Canaanites, the Midianites, the Philistines, all of them. These were the giants in the land. These were the children with the Nephilim DNA code. Some say they were huge, 20 feet tall, 30 feet tall. These were the ones that the children of Israel faced when they went to spy out the land. They were so intimidated by what they saw that they came back with great fear. And yet Joshua and Caleb saw the truth, that God had removed the shadow off of these giants. There was no longer a satanic protection on them. At that time, the children of Israel could have gone in and just cleaned house completely, but we know what happened in that story. So it's interesting that at the end of the 40 years, the children of Israel are brought back to the river, and they're commanded to go in and take the land. One of the commandments that was given to the children of Israel was that everyone must die, every father, son, baby, child, even the animals slaughtered and wiped off the face of the earth. And people can look at that and say, well, how can that be God? Why would God kill innocent children? What is this really all about? This can't be of God. But you must realize that what was at stake here was the genetic code of the Nephilim, the seed of the Nephilim. The seed was growing and multiplying in the earth once again, and if it was not completely annihilated, it would carry forward into the future. This was not God's plan nor intention, so you had the commandment, kill them all. Well, unfortunately, the Israelites did not walk in that word. They did not kill them all. And the prophecy that came to the children of Israel, if you don't do what I've commanded you to do today, they will be as a prick in your eye and a thorn in your side. And to this day, those signs come up in the spiritual warfare that we live under because they have to do with the infiltration of the satanic seed that is still in the earth, that comes against the sons of God to undermine, to blind, to block, and to abort the progress of the manifestation of the sons of God. So here we are once more again in the earth at the end of days. And so the prophecy is, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. We're dealing with a widespread input of the Nephilim seed as they go about to control mankind and to drive them into a very specific and very planned end result. That end result primarily has to do with the wiping out of humanity. That has always been their plan. A lot more is happening during this time, yet so much of this would have been removed had the children of Israel been obedient to what was commanded of them. Let's talk a little bit about what God is doing. What happens when Christ is brought forth? Once again, we have the pure lineage. We know there has always been a remnant throughout time, and that remnant has been the pure seed. They've always been in the earth. But what did the Father do that was a little bit different with Christ? Well, we saw what Satan did when he brought the fallen angels. He chose to change the DNA genetic code. So when the Father overshadowed Mary with the birthing of Christ, we literally have a new genetic code that was created, a pure genetic code. And Christ was, and is, the firstborn of many sons to come to birth now. The first of many that will be of this new DNA, this new gene, this new chromosome structure that's happening, even if we don't really quite understand it yet. The word says that flesh and blood would not inherit the kingdom. Why is that? Well, it has to do with the blood, and it has to do with the genealogy. To some extent, and I don't know how widespread the genetic makeup in mankind has been tainted by the Nephilim influence at this point. But the word to the sons is, behold, I will do something new. The prophecy is that God will bring about a new creation, not following the order of Adam or mankind as we know it, but patterned after Christ. We don't realize how pervasive the satanic input has been in this generation by virtue of the DNA within mankind. It could be millions that walk the face of the earth that have been tainted with this impure lineage. There is something happening here in the change of our DNA and chromosome structure that we haven't understood yet. It's hard to understand what is happening with this change, yet the prophecy is in a moment. In the twinkling of an eye, you will all be changed at the last trump. We know that a change is happening. We know that God is bringing forth something new in the earth. We know that the sons of God are being changed from a worm to a butterfly. We realize that the sons have been in a type of cocoon while in their present sojourn, waiting for the time that they would emerge as a whole new creation. To me, that speaks of a whole different DNA, something that has nothing to do with the earth, with mankind, and with what we've known. And that has always been the word, behold, I will do something new, as God begins to bring forth a whole new creation. I know you can look at the people that walk the face of the earth, and they may not be completely the seed of Satan. They may not be a Nephilim, but there's something not right about them, something in their genetic makeup that is not correct. If you look, you'll see that. More and more it's becoming evident that you have various levels of creation or humanity walking on the face of the earth that you really can't quite explain. But you know something's different. Some people may say, well, there's aliens walking amongst us, and that may or may not be true. But definitely there is something happening within mankind that is not good. You have the flip side, that God is bringing something new, a totally new creation. But on the other side of that, in the vast darkness that encompasses the earth at this time, we have seen how the evil in mankind has been driven to manipulate the DNA, has been driven to create hybrid humans and hybrid animals. We only see the tip of the iceberg of what's being done by mankind at this time in manipulating the DNA structure of human beings. We've had no idea how vast and extensive this goes, but it's a lot deeper than what we've known. A vision came about a year ago during the blood moon, and it has to do with what is unfolding right now during this time. The word was that the lining up of the various celestial bodies will cause a release of a negative satanic energy that was going to affect all of mankind. Unless you're really walking with God, you will be affected by this energy that is being injected into the earth plane. Well, let me be more specific. A teaching that came maybe 20 years ago had to do with celestial bodies lining up, whether it was conjunctions or various other celestial manifestations. And every time something like this would happen, there would be a release into the natural plane of spiritual energy. Generally, it was a release of negative level spiritual energy. And we began to watch this over the last 20 years and began to document this. So when this vision came, we understood that this last major conjunction of the blood moon in October of 2015 was indeed going to see a major release of a vibration and energy that was going to touch everyone in mankind unless they were on a path to sonship, on the path to really walking with God. The specific word was that we were going to begin to see a greater manifestation of violence in the earth. It would be within people, families, and relationships, you name it, but on every level. And over the past year, we have seen this increasing. A great deal more volatility and hostility and anger. A lot more of that has been escalating, and we're only at the beginning of what is going to really possess the earth. For there is no doubt that a violence is beginning to possess the earth. The scripture talks about how people will think that they're doing God a favor by killing the sons. This is in the book of John. I believe that only comes about because something of a pervasive spirit like this so possesses people that they're driven with this violent spirit to react and literally become a channel for what Satan is wanting to do. Had the children of Israel been obedient and wiped out the Nephilim and the Nephilim seed, I am confident that many of the cultures and races that we have today, whose genetic code can be sourced back to these various races, would not even exist on the face of the earth. Go back to the time of Abraham and Ishmael. Abraham's prayer was, "Oh, that Ishmael may live in thy sight." And Ishmael became the father of so much of the evil that has been handed down from generation to generation. What would have happened if Ishmael did not live and was taken out? A great deal of change in history that we know of, and a great deal of change in what we're presently dealing with in the earth. So many things are a product of choices and decisions made by the children of Israel and by individuals in the early days of the human race that would have changed the future as we know it considerably. However, we do know the promise is that God is doing something new. The manifesting of the sons of God is not going to be a people who have just been redeemed mentally with the mind of Christ, who have just come alive and walked more and more in the realm of spirit, but literally they will be a new creation. You're in the process right now of walking this out, and it can be hard to quantify. How do you look at yourself and say, well, I feel different. Something has changed. Something in my DNA just shifted. It's very hard to quantify what's happening. But I know that the sons are going through these changes. And even if we don't understand it, the end product is that God is creating something new, an entirely new race of people called the sons of God. That is who you are. That is what you are. And this is the transformation that you have been destined to experience.